For people who transition out of CAMHS, those young people will also have a care plan. It will be a discharge care plan, but that should also contain information of who to contact, what to do with this, what to do with that, and make sure that no one is left without a plan of what to do next. And if things change, then the system needs to know that and understand that, so that the system can respond appropriately and manage things safely. What I don't want to do is to put extra burden on a system that is already struggling with capacity. Therefore, whilst it may be frustrating not to hear from the service you're going into, calling them every week may not be the most helpful thing to do. So I would encourage people to sit tight where they can and wait. They will be managed and taken onto the team at the earliest opportunity. But if they're not hearing anything for a while, then my advice would be call up and find out what's going on, and that could be via the GP or the contact number that you've been given as part of your transition care plan. The waiting list in adult services for what we call a lead practitioner, which is the lead clinician allocated to each person, can be a few months. Ideally, if someone is transitioning from CAMHS to the adult service, there should have been the transition care plan formed 6 months before the transition, with a lead within the new service identified, and that lead person should be involved in the transition planning. So ideally there shouldn't be a waiting list, but sometimes, depending on individual teams out in the community, if they don't have enough capacity to meet the demand, it may be that a waiting list exists, and then during that time what should happen is that if someone is on a waiting list, they should still have a number they can check in with and find out what's happening whilst they're waiting to be allocated a lead practitioner. And if they're on medication and the GP isn't able to prescribe and follow up, then it's really important that there's someone identified within the adult service to oversee and prescribe that medication, because what we don't want is for important medication to be missed during that transfer of care. If someone's transferred from CAMHS to the adult service, they should be clear who their go-to person is within the adult service before they transition from CAMHS to adult service, because the whole idea of a transition protocol, a transition care pathway and care plan is that people don't fall between the gaps, and that there's a seamless transition from one service to the other. For good reasons, unfortunately, it's not always possible to allocate a lead practitioner before the transition, and therefore someone may need to go on a waiting list for a lead practitioner. And during that time, the care plan should identify a number to call, a person to contact, to find out what's happening, or to discuss any new worries or concerns that may have happened along the line while they're waiting. The GP is also a good person to go to as well, and they can tell you more about hopefully what's happening whilst you're on the waiting list. Most teams run a triage system, and they will assign prioritization for certain people who are transferring over, depending on complexity, depending on their needs. So that would be usually decided before the transfer, and that list is reviewed regularly, so that if people on that list, if things have changed, they could be reprioritized. It could mean that the list does change, but in a very basic way, when you join the list, most people will join towards the bottom and then move up the list as other people get allocated to a lead practitioner. So the approach is as fair as possible, because everyone who's been referred has needs. Everyone who's been referred is important, of course, but that needs constant reviewing to make sure that things haven't changed, and that's done by the triage team.